Those of you who are young may not know who John Lennon is. Isn't that sad? We may not know John Lennon is. But you can tell when you're getting old because you listen to the oldies station and they're starting to play your college day songs. And that means you're getting old because it's now oldies. And I'm now hearing those songs in the on KRS 101, which is sad for me at least. But John Lennon once said that if you want to try to give rock and roll another name, you might call it Chuck Berry. And those of you who may have heard, number one fan here is Yaya, heard that Chuck Berry passed away yesterday. Does anyone not know who Chuck Berry is? Raise your hand. Oh my gosh. You're just trying to be young. Okay, you really don't know who Chuck Berry is. Yaya loves Chuck Berry. In fact, my next question is, who has seen Chuck Berry in concert? Yaya, and of course Ryan, because he worked there. But Yaya has seen Chuck Berry in concert. Chuck Berry, those of you who may not know, was born in St. Louis, Missouri. And Berry had an interest in music from an early age. And while still a high school student, and I want you to know that while he was still a high school student, he was convicted of armed robbery and was sent to a reformatory, which is also kind of juvenile prison, for 3 years. After his release, Berry settled into married life and worked at an automobile assembly plant. By early 1953, and that's probably why you don't know, because this is the time of life. Those of you who are already running around in 1953, you should know this. Influenced by, those of you may know Chuck Berry, he's very good in the guitar. This thing we call guitar riffs and showmanship techniques of a blues musician. And Berry began performing with the Johnny Johnson Trio. He recorded Maybelline, and you probably still don't know what that is, which sold over 1 million copies, reaching number 1 on Billboard's magazine's rhythm and blues chart. So he started off a little bit as a blues musician, and then he kind of graduated or transformed into rock and roll. By the end of the 1950s, Berry was an established star with several hit records and film appearances and a lucrative touring career. But in January 1962, he was sentenced to prison again. Did you know that he's been there? This is the second time now. To 3 years in prison for transporting a 14-year-old girl across state lines. I don't know if he knew that. I don't know that he was trying to kidnap the girl, but I think the girl was just on the bus when they were going to another tour. Well, anyway, after his release in 1963, Berry had more hits in the mid-60s, including No Particular Place to Go, You Never Can Tell, and Nadine. By the mid-1970s, he was still performing. He was more in demand as a live performer, and in 1979, this is the third time, he served 120 days in prison, this time for tax evasion. My goodness. Talk about recidivism. Berry was among the first musicians to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame on its opening in 1986. Chuck Berry is known for rock and roll, but he started, as with many African-American musicians, in the blues genre. African American communities of the United States, the blues are from the spiritual songs, the work songs, the shouts, the chants, and simple narrative ballads. It always tells a story. Becoming root and the blues, as we all know, those of you who have taken the history or theory or music theory in college, because that's one of the what is that called? It's not a requirement. It's a an elective, thank you. I can't also hear. An elective, and so, you want to do a quick and an easy elective. Everyone goes to music theory. But blues became the roots of jazz, became the roots of bluegrass, R&B, rock and roll, heavy metal, hip-hop, and other popular music forms. I personally do not like blues music, but it works for me on certain occasions. Because blues is just a bit too depressing for me, but that's exactly what it wants. I wanted to play to you the most popular Chuck Berry song, and I'm sure when you hear it, you will know what it is and who it is. Hey, Ryan, You can play that now. They're like, oh yeah. I thought that was Michael J. Fox. Okay, that's not Michael J. Fox in Back to the Future. He was actually playing that. And if you guys remember when the guy who was playing, he hurt his hand, right? And he went to the back and he started calling. And he was actually calling Chuck Berry because he was saying, Chuck, it's your cousin Marvin Berry. You want to hear the newest sound? He goes, here it is. And he was offering, he put the phone so they can hear Michael J. Fox. But that's an original Chuck Berry song. That's his most popular song. Yaya, what is the title of that song? Tako si Yaya. Oh, Johnny Be Good. She did? She did? Okay, she answered that. All right. Well, that's all for Chuck Berry. And Yaya's other favorite is the other one, the one who did the twist. Chubby Checker, there you go. That's not the song, but the artist and Chubby Checker. And so he's also getting on in years, and Yaya will be sad when he goes too. If you take a quick look at Paul's problematic life in Acts, you will see a lot of depression. You will see a lot of blues. If there is a soundtrack to the life of Paul, there are long periods in Paul's life where it's the blues. That would be the soundtrack of his life. But you will see the following in his life. Early Christians didn't believe in conversion and did not believe in his conversion, for example, in particular, I'm sorry. And they tried to kill him. They tried to imprison him, and they have imprisoned him, tried to kill him, tried to mess his name up and all that. After he healed the crippled man, bystanders thought that he was a god and used that opportunity to tell them, Paul did, that there is only one true God. And when he did that, the Jews started stoning him. He cast out a demon from a slave girl, a fortune teller, and her pimp, the pimp of that girl, blamed Paul and said, that's why I'm not making any more money, because you cast out the demon from the girl. That's my business. Paul then was thrown into prison. He was beaten with rods. He was arrested in Jerusalem. He was in house arrest for 2 years. On his way to Rome for trial before the emperor, he was shipwrecked. I don't know about you, but all the depressing things that can ever happen to someone has happened in this guy's life. He was shipwrecked and on dry ground. Finally he made it to dry ground. When he reached dry ground, he was bitten by a poisonous snake. Okay, his life is not over yet. And for a long period of time, he was under arrest in Rome. And so Paul also wrote about his troubles, just like when the southern men and women wrote the blues, where the blues emerged, Paul wrote about his troubles, and one of them is found in 2 Corinthians. And I'm going to read from chapter 1, and the girls are happy because I only have one verse today. They don't have to be flipping back and forth. But 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 8 to 11. And Paul is writing to the church in Corinth. We do not want you to be uninformed, brothers, about the hardships we suffered in the province of Asia. We were under great pressure, far beyond our ability to endure, so that we despaired even of life. Indeed, in our hearts we felt the sentence of death. But this happened that we might not rely on ourselves, but on God who raises the dead. He has delivered us from such a deadly peril, and He will deliver us. On Him we have set our hope that He will continue to deliver us, as you help us by your prayers. Then many will give thanks on our behalf for the gracious favor granted us in answer to the prayers of many. Such a short verse, 3 verses from that whole letter, but it talks about the perils and the problems and the hardships and the sufferings that he had. To go back to verse 8, look at that, read that again. We were under great pressure, far beyond our ability to endure. In other words, no one writes this way anymore. No one talks this way anymore. But it's all like, we almost died. That is what he's trying to say. so that we despaired even of life. He was desperate to be able to live, and they thought it was their end. But in nicer words, he started to tell them, or he told them about the hardships they suffered, and that how they were under great pressure far beyond their ability to endure. Here we see the great Paul feeling the weight of depression, the weight of hopelessness. To the church of Corinth, he wrote about it. And however, even more important is the part of the letter that comes next. From verses 9 to 11, the beginning of the letter talks about, the beginning of the verses, talks about the torture and the hardship that he had. But even more important is what he said towards the end of these 3-4 verses. And we learn 3 things from this passage. You know that I'm a pastor, and so there's always 3 points. So number 1, first, according to Paul, according to these verses, which reminds me, by the way, did you do your homework for Sunday school? Luke 20, what did I say? Luke 22? 12, 22 to 24, something like that, right? It's a verse that you already know, but this is exactly what you're doing with Bible study and the first method that we did, which is the meditation method. You look at the passage and you see what you learn, and you see the points of what Paul has. Number 1, it is overwhelming. We see that up and down verses 8 to 10. You don't have to kind of do a word study. You don't have to have a translation, an easier translation. You don't have to get a Bible in Tagalog. You can get that on what he said. Life, according to Paul, especially his life in Asia during that time, became overwhelming. And at that time, he said it was very overwhelming. Even the great apostle Paul said that he felt unbearably crushed. That's what he's saying. And despaired of life itself. In addition to emotional stress, we also know that Paul had a physical ailment. Somewhere in one of his writings, he talked about his thorn in the flesh. And many of you have heard that over and over again. And up to now, great theologians and scholars still try to figure out what in the world that thorn in the flesh is. I mean, it could be anything. There's no specific explanation that was given to us by Paul, but it's something of a physical nature. So he called it his thorn in the flesh. Well, we don't know what that was. Many believe that he had epilepsy. Others think that it's arthritis. I think it's gout. That's a thorn in the flesh that doesn't leave, right? I mean, it's just there all the time. Which reminds me, if you see me parking in the handicap space, there's a reason I have a handicap placard. In fact, last night, Rainiel was trying to buy it from me so he can park over there at Rogan's birthday. But that's one of the best things that my doctor has given to me. A temporary one. I don't have a permanent one. I just have a temporary one until May because of my gout and because of my bursitis that happens on my foot. But anyway, I seriously think that's gout. It's a thorn in the flesh, something that doesn't leave. It's just there all the time. Some think, though, that Paul was married at that time, and when he said thorn in the flesh, he was talking about his wife. You didn't find that funny? Of course, every wife would say, well, and vice versa. This is my thorn in the flesh, and they would point to their husband. Whatever that ailment, good luck, Tijok and Delilah, you are here. Whatever that ailment was, it caused him considerable pain and frustration. The physical stress just added to the stress of life. And I want you to think of that in your own lives. And I'm thinking about that right now. I just took medicine, so if I sound really loosey-goosey, it's because of the medicine. But if you think about that, when we have emotional stress and you put on top of that physical stress, I don't know what considerable pain and frustration that will bring to your life, because it brings that kind of frustration to me, especially if you run out of sick days and you're like, I cannot call in sick. And Paul has become overwhelmed at all that life has thrown at him. And if we think about our lives, life can indeed become overwhelming, even for the best people. You might think, I read the Bible every time. I did Pastor Jay's homework, and I did the meditation study for Bible study. I do all that. I come to church on time. I come to church every Sunday. And so I'm one of the good saints. I'm one of the good people. I even serve when I can. But life can indeed become overwhelming even for the best of us. I don't have to ask how overwhelming life has been for you. There are events in our lives this past few weeks that have depressed us, that has grieved us, that has taken us to the last straw, as Paul has said. And in the life of Paul, it's no different. But from Paul, from that overwhelming stress, we learned a second thing. The second thing that we learn is also found in those 3 short verses. And the second thing we learn is that God is always faithful. And imagine speaking that in the midst of pain. Imagine speaking that in the midst of stress. Usually in the midst of pain, in the midst of stress, what we ask is, Lord, heal me, right? Lord, take away the stress. If you all know, if you come here on Wednesdays, Bible study, one of the Sunday school, prayer meeting, one of the things that we all pray for are jobs for certain people, better jobs for other people. And for those people who have a job, if they have a problem with their supervisors, that the Lord will send the supervisor away, or the Lord will make the supervisor retire. By the way, just to kind of throw that in, the first time that we prayed for my supervisor, but my vice principal is something else. But anyway, we prayed for our vice principal Wednesday. I forgot to tell the Wednesday people that the next day she was sweet as honey. And it's got to be the prayer, because on her own she cannot be sweet. There is no way that woman can be sweet because of the kind of person she is. But because of God working, and this is exactly what Paul is talking about, that God is faithful. And this is perhaps the hardest thing to understand when we are in the midst of pain. When we are so low, it's very hard to see beyond ourselves. It is so incredibly difficult to see God and to see that God cares. You start working in a place where there's an incredible amount of stress. And I'm not just talking about prison. I'm talking about hospitals. I'm talking about those of you who are in sales, those of you who work for commission. I mean, those of you who work with students, with especially probably teenagers. I mean, that's worse. That's like taking some what is this called? Whip, and whipping yourself. I don't know, those people who teach high school, I don't know how you do that. It's hard enough to teach adults, hard enough to teach kids, but I don't know about high school students. But anyway, that's exactly what you do. When you are so low, it's very hard to see beyond ourselves, and it's so incredibly difficult to see that God cares. Yet, somehow, through this pain that Paul is talking about, Paul also, in his second breath, says that God has not abandoned him. Look at verse 10. And we're going to put verse 10 back up on the screen if you don't have your Bibles with you. He who has, is that what he has? He has delivered, I have a different translation, so I'm going to read from here. He has delivered us from such a deadly peril, and he will deliver us. On him we have set our hope that he will continue to deliver us. So I'm going to talk about the first few words. In other words, somebody said, by the way, God never wastes a hurt. Let me say that again. God never wastes a hurt. In other words, God's desire is that we learn from our pain, emerge from it stronger, and find greater faith in the process. In the midst of our struggles, we tend to have a limited view of reality, right? Because we're in pain, because we are struggling. In other words, we are beaten by life's events and circumstances, and many times consequences, by the way, from our own decisions. I don't want to I don't want to be teaching here, and I don't want you to be understanding that everything that happens in our lives is because of just life. I disagree. Every pain, every hurt that happens in our life is not just because life threw that our way, not just because the Lord said, okay, I think you need to have a little bit of pain and struggle in your life. No, most of the pain and the hurt that I have in my life is because of my own decision, because of the circumstances and because of the consequences of my poor choices. And there was let me tell you about poor choices. There was a volunteer from Cal State Fullerton, a college student, who came to my class and started sharing with the inmates in my class. And one of the things that they're inviting them to do is to write a letter from a felon. This letter would be a letter saying that I have done these things, I have served my time, and would you please give me a job? Well, it's not in those words, but that's what it is. In order for them to have they called it something, I forgot what it is. It's not a cover letter, but it's a letter from a felon kind of thing, introducing themselves to a potential employer and saying that this is what I've done, and without hiding from it, and just say it, that's what it is. But for some reason, when they came to the part where I have made poor choices and I have made my mistakes, somehow most of my students cannot write that down. Why? Because in prison, as you all know, nobody is guilty. Everyone is innocent. And so it was very hard for them. Maybe 2 or 3 are the only people out of the class of 27, or the only people who actually said, I have made poor choices. Why? Because it's very hard to say that the pain and the hurt and the depression and the struggles that we're feeling right now is not because the life just threw it at us. It's not because of our mothers and our fathers. It's not because of our kids. It's not because of our friends. It's because of us, because of the poor choices and the mistakes that we have done. But surely we need to understand that. And in other words, God's desire is that we learn from that pain, whether we brought it upon ourselves or whether He allowed it to enter our lives. God never wastes a hurt. And so for us to emerge from it stronger and find greater faith in the process. In the midst of our struggles, as I said, we tend to have a very limited view of reality, and we get caught up and are only able to see events and situations from our perspective, just like the inmate. I can only see, and I don't think I did that. I don't think I should have been sent to prison because of that. I don't think I deserve this. Many times consequences from our own decisions, but we don't want to accept that. We become very selfish. And if we were selfish to begin with, as normal people, when depression hits, I think it makes us more selfish. We only see our perspective, our pain. We only see our hurt. We only see our demand to be healed. But God has another perspective, one in which He is able to take away our pain. And so, the depression hits, the lowness hits, and then the Lord proves, according to Paul, that God is faithful and even more faithful after the pain. But God has another perspective in which He is able to take away our pain. And how is that? It's the third point in this whole verse, in a very small part of this letter to the Corinthians by Paul. When we undergo pain and depression and hopelessness, many times it produces scars. Okay? What are scars? Some scars, by the way, are seen and some are unseen. What is scar in Tagalog? Is there a better word for it? Sugat? Well, sugat that is has kind of healed, but it stays there, right? Or in other words, peklat. Okay, I just don't like that word. I don't know why. It sounds like. Never mind. I don't want to say it. But it's a scar, and if you start looking at start remembering your bodies and start remembering parts of your body that has a scar. You can remember where it came from, right? And this depression and this pain and this hurt and this injury that you had, many times it produces scars. And I believe that there are scars that are seen and that are unseen. But there's also a cliche that many psychologists, and I'm sure Chris has heard of this, psychologists say that scars make us stronger. Well, not all the time. We sometimes wish our scars weren't visible. And what if they don't give us a sense of strength? Not all scars are going to be helpful. Not all scars are going to make us stronger. But scars can also even cause us torment. Scars can also cause us angst. What if our scars remind us of terrible times or places we've been instead of giving us strength? The only scar I can produce to you, it's actually going away. But I used to have scars here from working at McDonald's. the French fries thing, from the grill to the French fries. I mean, I always have a new scar every week that I would show my parents. That's a new one. That's a new one. Wait, it's still here. That's still there. And we also, those of you who may not know, my sister and I fight like cats and dogs. Well, actually, fight like cats and dogs who are armed. And so my sister and Jeth and I would fight using knives, using blades. And some people are like, oh, Pastor Jay. I'm like, yeah. Blades. Why do you think I work in prison now? Blades and knives. And what else? Jeth would use scissors. But for some reason, I always kind of get to win. And so the scars will be on Jeth and not on me. But Jerome, I remember Jerome when he was young. He fell 30 flights of steps. Can you imagine? 30 flights. Some kids would have died with that. But Jerome, that's why Jerome's like that. But anyway, he threw himself down a flight of stairs because he was running after my parents because they were going somewhere. I don't remember the story, but let's not tell the story, Mother. But anyway, he fell down 30 flights of steps, and he has the scar to show that. Some of us have scars that go beyond cooking with hot oil. Some of us have scars that go beyond falling down a flight of steps. But here's the thing that is always true with all scars. Maybe it is truly a cliche that scars make us stronger, and some scars really that does not apply to everyone. But here's the thing that is always true with all scars. We retain scars for its narrative value. And what does that mean? This word narrative is always something that people throw around all the time. But really, simply, what it says is that our scars tell a what? A story. It tells a story. God desires that the scars from our pain be a story that speaks, not to you. Because a story is supposed to be told not to yourself. You're telling a story to yourself, there's something wrong with you. You might want to see Chris. But but really, when you start telling a story, it is meant to be told to others. Look at the second part of verse 10. On him we have set our hope that he will continue to deliver us, which means what? He has delivered us before, that he will continue to deliver us. But cause us torment? Cause us angst? No. What if scars remind us of terrible things? I mean, that's not what Paul is trying to say. Then look at verse 11. As you help us, sorry guys, am I too fast for you? Then on verse 11 it says, as you help, and I'm sorry if I have a different translation, so I'm going to, it's the same. As you help us by your prayers, then many will give thanks on our behalf for the gracious favor granted us in answer to the prayers of many. In other words, all these things that are happening to us, and because the Lord has delivered us, we want to tell you. Because of the gracious favor granted to us, by the way, in answer to your prayers. Because after hearing what we have gone through, you have decided to pray. That is what he's telling to the saints in Corinth. Not only was he strengthened by their prayers, but they allowed others to hear his story. It is our joy to tell the stories of our healing. It is a joy for us to tell the story of overcoming depression. It is a joy for us to tell our story of overcoming addiction, so others may be encouraged and strengthened. Scars are a sign of our survival and serve as banners of faith. So instead of saying scars make us stronger, your new thing should be, my scar is a banner of faith. There are many different causes of depression, and we all sing the blues because of different circumstances. I remember in 2009, one of the horrific side effects of the economy and how people were losing their homes is depression and ultimately suicide. I remember reading a story of a man who was earning $7 an hour, and he was forced to buy a $600,000 home. And those of you who know math, and you don't need to know math like me, I don't know math. But if you're earning $7 an hour, you shouldn't be buying, first of all, a home probably, with the kind of prices we have here in Southern California. But a man earning $7 an hour was forced or was sold to buying a home worth $600,000. And when he was about to sign and saw the monthly payments was going to be $5,800, and I don't know about you, but $7 an hour is not going to come up with $5,800. He said, I cannot afford this. But the loan people said that he will lose his deposit, and that is not true. You will not lose your deposit. And so just go ahead and sign. And this is what you do. You fill the house with many, many, many people and charge them. And so he tried to do that. Obviously, that doesn't work because they still cannot come up with $5,800. The wife committed suicide. Their dream became a nightmare. And it goes on and on and on. Different biblical personalities struggled with depression as well. For some, it required the intervention of others. And God has placed people and systems in our lives to help us recover from that. I believe that mental health professionals can be God's agents in healing. I truly believe that. And I believe that modern drug therapy, when sensibly used, is a tool of God's healing. And sometimes we have to work hard to come out of our depressed times. I remember Chris giving a talk on depression. You guys remember that? Some of you were here. And we need to do that again, Chris, so everyone gets to hear it. Her talk was so informative. It was very admirable. But I believe more importantly, you see something that many people suffering from depression may not have. And that is what? God's intervention. God can choose to intervene in a supernatural way to heal us. We can never discount the possibility of God acting to heal us on his own. The New Testament doesn't say that Paul did anything on his own to heal his depression. He simply trusted God. He simply trusted God. And God brought relief from suffering. Many of us, me included, will say, that's all I need to do? Just to trust God? I was talking to a friend last night and something horrific and hard, for lack of a better word, difficult is happening in her life. And one of the things that she said is that, Jay, I learned to trust God in these times. And that's the problem that we all have, not just my friend, but even I and all of us have. That the only time we learn to trust God is when we are in the midst of pain, when we are in the midst of struggle. We don't trust him when things are happening well, when things are happening, good things are happening in our lives. But when there is depression, when there is struggles, when there is pain, when there is suffering, truly, I'm glad that we are starting to learn how to trust God. He simply trusted God. And God brought relief from Paul's suffering. Many of us, me included, will say, really? That's all I need to do? It can't be that easy. If it is that easy, then why are people still depressed? After a short time, a very short time, and we can go through depression, but a short and a very short time at that, we need to stop looking at ourselves and start the very hard task of trusting someone we cannot see. I'm going to say that again. We can be depressed, but we cannot be depressed forever. Because after a short time, a very short time, we need to stop looking at ourselves and start the very hard task of trusting someone we cannot see, who is not physically here, who's not physically around. Paul immersed himself in prayer, and God acted in a very supernatural way. The lesson is that we cannot always let God be the last resort. Rather, he needs to be the first resort. Whatever happens to us, the experience of Paul teaches us that God will not abandon us. And I don't know how much more you want to do a study or a method in Bible study on those 3-4 verses, very short verses that we read. But rather, Paul is saying he needs to be the first resort. Whatever happens to us, Paul teaches us that God will not abandon us. And you might say, well, thank you, Lord, I'm not suffering from anything right now. That's wonderful, but this is the time to trust the Lord. Not when we are on our deathbeds, not when we're going through surgery, not when we're so afraid to go to see the doctor, but the trust needs to start now. So you can sing the blues. I can like certain blues songs, but don't finish the song. Rather, may God be with us all, for He is our only hope. And you don't have to finish that song. You can sing it for a while, but you don't have to finish it, because trust in God is what Paul is teaching us today. Amen? Amen. Please stand and we're going to pray.